Kniters, it's me Lois with Aussie Lozzie Knit Designs. Today I'm going to be walking you through a tutorial on how to measure for the long tail cast on. I know this is something that there's so many videos and tutorials, photo tutorials, just so much information around on how to do this, but I also know, because I've been in forums and groups and online, that this is the #1 question that's asked. Well, I would say #2, but I'm always seeing people ask, how do I measure for a long tail cast on? I'm running out of yarn, I have too much yarn at the end. Those are just the common problems that people run into. So what I'm going to do with you today is so much more than just show you how to measure. We're gonna really take the time to look at the anatomy of the long tail cast on, how it works, and why your measurement may be coming up either too long or too short. Anyway, let's go ahead and get started. All right, so in my blog post, I talk about us becoming scientists when we're going to start looking at the anatomy of the cast on edge, and that's because I want us not to condemn or judge ourselves for past work or struggles. Anyway, so if you can grab something that you've knit, it could be a finished object or a swatch. I have a swatch that I knit here, and you can see this is my cast on edge, and it matches the knitting. See that? Do you see how well it matches? This is a really good example. I have not always done this. Certainly at the beginning, I never was able to do that, but I've learned a lot through practice, and you will too. So if you can grab a swatch or something that you knit, preferably in stockinette because it's just easier. What we're gonna do, grab the swatch and then grab the appropriate size needle for the size that you knit it with. This for me is a size 4. And then we're just going to pick up some stitches. It doesn't have to be a lot. I would say about 5, but you can do more. It's up to you. At least 5. Whoops, I can't get that one. Splitting the yarn, okay? Right there. Okay, so let's just put that on there. All right, so I've picked up those stitches. And the thing that I notice about my knitting gauge, if I lay this flat, we can see, pick it up so it's more flat for you. You can see that my lines are pretty even. And what I notice right off the bat for me, and what I want you to do for yourself, is think about your knitting gauge and your cast on gauge in relation to your needle size, because our needle sizes are going to change. If we use bulky yarn, if we use lace weight yarn, we'll be using larger and smaller needles, and so our cast on and knitting gauge will be smaller, but the way we knit is always the same, right? So for me, we can see this is about the space of the knitting needle size between each of these stitches. So that's what my cast on edge needs to look like too. It needs to look about that same width, okay? And whatever yours is, that's what your cast on edge needs to be like. If it's the same size, great. If it's not, great. If it's closer, that's okay. If it's wider, that's okay, as long as it matches your knitting gauge. All right, so let's pull that out. All right, so we want to grab some yarn, and what we're going to look at is, where does our yarn go when we're long tail casting on? So we'll just cast on a few stitches. Go ahead and make a slip knot. We don't need a long tail because we're doing 3 stitches. Here is our long tail, and then the rest attach to the ball. So I'm going to insert the knitting needle just like so. And now the long tail is towards me, and the one to touch the ball is away from me, right? Then I'm just gonna cast you through it. So we pick up the yarn on the thumb, we bring it over and pick up the yarn from the index finger. And we'll notice that it's actually the yarn on the index finger, so the yarn that's attached to the ball, that is wrapping the knitting needle. And the one from the thumb is traveling the length of the knitting needle and holding the other yarn in place, okay? I think that's really important to note because when I was first doing this, I thought that I was wrapping around the knitting nail with the long tail, which is why we use the wrap method. And so then I would wrap way too much yarn because it would be spacing it out, and that does not work. All right, so now that we know where our yarn is going from the long tail, we can try the wrap method. All right, so we're gonna wrap not too tightly and not too loosely relative to your own knitting gauge. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Okay. It's very little yarn. So we do, So I like to count or wrap 5 or 10 times because it's easier to count by. If you're doing like 100 stitches, you can wrap 10 times and then just use that measurement. You could wrap 100 times, but that just seems like a lot of work to me, whatever. So we've got 5, 10, 15, 20, okay? And then you need a little extra, whoops, let me throw my knitting needle, about 5 inches, but I have this knitting needle we'll use to measure against. So I'm just gonna go to there, and that's where I'm gonna put my slip knot. It's just right there. Now I'm gonna actually go in detail on how to do the long tail. If you wanna watch just that part, I have another video that's gonna be just this. Anyway, so the long tail is closest to you and the tail attached to the ball is further away from you. We're going to pick up both tails with our ring and pinky and hold them in place. And then we're gonna use our index and thumb finger to make a slingshot. And I just did something weird with my middle finger, so here we go, just like that. Slingshot. Wile E. Coyote is ready for action. All right, so now to cast on. We'll take our knitting needle, insert it on the outside of the thumb, pick that yarn up, come around to our index finger, pick that yarn up, and we're just pulling it through the thumb yarn. Just like we saw, it holds that yarn in place and travels up the needle. So let go with your thumb. You can use your thumb to pull this out, or tight or not too tight. And now you're back in slingshot for the next stitch. So let's do that again. Pick up from the thumb, come over to the index finger, pick that up, bring it through the thumb, release, and tighten with the thumb, not too tight. Something I'm doing that I haven't mentioned is I'm using this index finger from my right hand to space out my stitches. This is a trick that I just kind of taught myself. I don't know if other people do it, but it helps me measure the gap between my stitches on the cast on so that it can match my knitting. So feel free to use that if it's helpful for you or not. 4, 6, 7, so we're doing 20. I've got 7. Here we go. 8. Let's count. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20. And we have our long tail left. So let's just check that against the knitting needle. And we are right in line with our measurement. Now this has taken me practice, and it will probably take you practice, but I think that you can get it. All right, so that was how to measure for the long tail cast on. And also we did a little cast on there. I will have a video tutorial just on how to do the long tail cast on so that we don't, if you just want a refresher on how to do the actual steps, you don't have to watch that whole long video. And I'll put a link below in the notes on where you can access that quicker video. Anyway, I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you did, will you please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel? If you would like to connect with me further, I am on Instagram as Aussie Lozzie Knits. I have a Facebook page, Aussie Lozzie Knit Designs, and I have a website and blog, www.aussielozzieknitdesigns.com. Thanks so much and happy knitting.